Hello, and welcome to the Your Food Matters podcast. I am Dr. Sue Kleiner, here with my wonderful friend and colleague, Erik Bustillo.
Hello, hello, hello. How we doing today?
We are great today. You're outside, lucky you in Florida.
Yep,
Well,
got some
we
beautiful weather.
we beautiful weather. We are here to talk to you today about gender equality, female representation, and others in science, in research projects, clinical research studies, as scientists, and as decision makers in industry, food, beverage, nutraceutical, otherwise known as the supplement industry. If you enjoy our podcast, and we're so happy you're here, please share us with your friends. We are on all the podcast networks, platforms, and we are also on the Move Nutrition channel on YouTube, where you can listen to us and see us make funny faces at the same time. So, um, thank you again for being here, and I'm going to let Erik take it away.
All right, rock and roll. Thank you, Sue. I appreciate it. Now, before we do get started on that, I just wanted to say on the last episode we had teed up a topic which was on sleep, but we are going to have a guest on that in the near future. So we wanted to leave it to someone who will be able to kind of expand a little bit more with their professional knowledge on sleep research and all of that. So
So
just wanted
just put
to
a snooze button on that one.
um, yeah, so today's conversation, I think, is an important one to have. I think we can easily overlook certain topics. I think in a lot of cases we've just gotten so used to, in air quotes, things being the way that they are, that we forget to actually make things better, right? So how can we progress? And in large part, especially in research in the nutraceutical space and as practitioners, we have to take into consideration the who's doing the research, who the research is on, and how all of this can be collaborative, right? So I think that when it comes to just gender all around in our space, um, it can be a very emotional topic. But I think we have to take off certain blinders and just kind of see things for what they are, and understand that men and women, even though there are going to be similarities, we're not one and the same. And even thinking about from a cultural standpoint, um, like even though the human race is one race, but culturally, Hispanics might do some things a little bit different than like the Caucasians in the U.S. in the south of the U.S. Even within our nation alone, the south to the north to the west to the middle of it, there's so many differences, and the the female conversation, the researcher, the athlete, the practitioner, I think it's one that we've been having for a little while now, but we really got to make some changes and really bring it to the forefront because some things just really have to change.
Yeah, I had written an article several months ago, it was published, and it was looking at what is the state of the science, basically, in research that includes female centric studies. And it was across the board from all health and medicine research, as well as sports nutrition and wellness. And it usually hovers around 20 to 25, 28% of studies, whether it's disease or sports nutrition, that focus on uh, females as the research subjects alone, or even more commonly, it's a study of both genders, but then they break out the results and we look at male centric evidence and female centric evidence or data from those studies. And so that's good, to get that. I'm not dissing doing that. That's really helpful. But there are issues with combined studies depending on what you are investigating. And sometimes it doesn't matter what the investigation question is. You really need to use a different methodology if you are looking at, for instance, women during their reproductive years. It's not like our our hormones don't wash over every single cell in our whole body, so that, well, if you're studying eye health, you shouldn't have to worry about female hormone biology in your research methodology. I mean, you really need to make considerations in designing the research itself. And so, as I said, it's somewhere 20 to 30%, sometimes as high as 40%, maybe, but rarely any higher than that. So we are definitely less than half of the research studies in evidence and data, and we're certainly not less than half of the population. So, wondering what traditionally has been done. Well, you take male data and you just convert it and say, well, based on body weight, we will adjust, let's say, the pharmaceutical recommendation, how much drug a woman needs to take versus a man. The interesting thing is that way more than half of the reports on negative side effects from drugs come from female females taking the drugs, when the data are designed from studies on men. So there are real health consequences. There is a real issue in allowing physicians to make healthy recommendations. They don't have the data they need to make, prescription recommendations. And that goes across the board, from that to the science in health and active and sports nutrition. It impacts whether or not we've got representation, as we said, in the C-suite, or we've got representation in the scientific laboratory.
Now, Sue, I have a question for you. If you've ever hypothesized this before, obviously, the female population has been underserved or perhaps understudied, and in turn underserved because of that, the lack of actual data on women or enough of it. Um, but the question I was going to ask is why? Why do you think? Do you think it's like just are men more willing to be participants in studies? Even though I've heard from friends and colleagues of mine who do research and they say women are better participants than men, for whatever reason that they would say. But yeah, have you ever thought of the why behind that?
Well, so I think it starts with just, if you want to think about who were the leading scientists and who were the decision makers, it was all white men, period, and just full stop. Um, and so a lack of recognition of the difference and the needs of the female body, just because it just wasn't part of the conversation. There was nobody there to represent. I just started watching the TV show representation of a really great book called Lessons in Chemistry. It was just a fun sort of summer read that, if you've never really considered what it was like to try and be a woman in science in the 1950s, that's a good way to get a, a good point of view. And ultimately it bleeds into today. It's better. It's not great yet, for many women. Anyway, so why is this? Well, one is we had no representation. We had no
So
voice.
I'm sorry to cut you off. So that alone can make a huge difference. The
Huge.
fact that it's predominantly just a bunch of dudes is by default going to essentially put women at a disadvantage from because there's no one that has a seat at the table, if you will.
Right, especially historically. So I want to shout out to the young men who are representing women who speak out on our behalf. You included. There's other wonderful male scientists, colleagues that you and I have who are doing female centric research and pushing the envelope on that. But in general, if there's no representation and it's not only gender oriented, certainly as race, representation, cultural representation, all of that it certainly lacks if there is no one there giving voice to the need. Um, that's one piece. And so, as we designed research methodologies that were accepted as the um, uh, strategies for studying certain conditions, any condition, it didn't include the concept of adjusting for female biology. And so the norm accepted in research methodology is male centric. And when even, I mean, in most of my career, it was abnormal or out of normal to then design a study based on the needs of of female biology. So in studying men, you can choose them, any time of the month at any point in their life, and you delineate them by age, typically. You have, boys, you have adolescents, you've got men between 18 and 40 or 45 or 50, and then sort of 50, 55 to 80 and older. And those are just categories. And then you do your study. Well, with women and girls and boys can be fairly well studied together, although I'm not quite sure. I'm not the expert in that. If there are indications for changes prior to puberty, but then once puberty sets in, there's a host of other considerations that need to be managed during a research study. What time in a woman's cycle is she in? Is she fully menarcheic? Is she does she have any disruptions with her period? Is she ovulating or not, even though she may get her period? So many things that need to be assessed as part of a research study. And certainly there are, colleagues that you and I have who have now published kind of the gold standard for design research methodology in studying females, and what considerations must be included in the clinical study. In that case, it becomes a little more complex than studying men. It's not too complex, it's not too expensive. If you're going to study women, this is what's required to study women. It isn't abnormal, it isn't overly costly, and so we're not going to do it. You just have to, the whole system has to be changed to accept that this is the normal expected clinical methodology for studying females. And so there's a lot of science out there from decades ago that isn't very well done compared to what we understand today. So that's another issue, this normal versus abnormal. It's only because it was so male centric. It's not abnormal to design your study appropriately to study females. And then um, again, funding strategies have to change. The institutional review boards in that oversee research and give approval for research to move forward for human studies, those need to change their expectations, and they are. That's what's exciting. That you must give a reason for doing a male centric study, that it really only pertains to males if you exclude females in your study. Um, that the same goes for a female centric study. Explain why males are not included. And so that is a whole new concept. There's got to be appropriate funding to fund hormone studies and the various other measurements that need to be done for appropriate clinical study. So that's, another level. And then finally, talking about the subjects themselves. And it's really funny that women do make great subjects, but they may not, especially at elite levels of sport, they may not as easily raise their hand to participate. And this is what my colleagues all over the world who are conducting these high level sports studies on women say, that it often is harder to get women to participate.
And when you say that, it makes me think. Well, before I say that, I had a thought on when you were saying that it's it's not that it's too complicated to do the research. I mean, obviously funding comes down to it, but it's not that women are too expensive. If anything, it sounds like it's about time that we just start doing these things. Um, so I appreciate you shining light on that. My head kind of goes to when you're talking about elite level athletes. Um, I wonder if there's hesitation there because if anything is going to potentially mess with my performance, and this is my thought process as an athlete, I don't want to be a part of it. If I'm
Right.
trying to win or excel, and then even more so, which is kind of like it's unfortunate in a way, and maybe it drives them to go harder. And I can't speak for anybody but myself, but I wonder if in a way like women, like female athletes, have felt almost like pigeonholed into like having to prove themselves and those sorts of things. Where now it's kind of like, hey, would you be willing to do some kind of a study? Well, what does the study entail? Like, is it going to affect my performance? Because I got something to prove, not just to myself and my team and whoever else, but the whole freaking world kind of thing.
I think that's part of it. Women are really locked into their strategy, as are all athletes, but they don't want to mess with anything that they're doing even in the off season, whereas typically that's when we try and do research on athletes, is not in the middle of their competitive season and mess with what they're doing, but even in the off season women are locked into their strategy. The other is, again, a little bit historical. The research on female athletes has often not been looking at performance or factors that influence performance. It has been looking at more sort of social factors or, uh, you know, um, other things. And what women really care about is their performance. Maybe it's and injury, risk of injury. Those are two really big things that the least number of studies have been about for women in sports and sports nutrition in particular. And so, if you're not going to look and give me data on how I can perform better, then don't bother me. I don't want to just spend time with a study where I'm reporting to you about what I'm eating and how I'm training, and you're sort of giving this observational data of how many supplements I take or whatever. That's irrelevant to my goal of performance. And so I think today also there's a recognition of that's a wide open area for research. And once scientists recognize where there's a wide open area of research, they jump to it. And so I think that's also part of it. It's like, if I don't know what I'm going to get out of this. And lastly, anything that I want to say, where you poke and prod a woman, she's less likely, at least historically, to participate. And I remember talking to scientists who were doing blood glucose studies, the carbohydrate studies, and trying to understand female burn rate during exercise and all of that. Well, that takes doing muscle biopsies. And men just say, fine, go for it, do it, even during, before and after an event or whatever. women just don't want to participate in that in the past. Again, I think there's a lot of evolution happening where the recognition is if I don't participate, then there's not going to be data. I can't complain if I'm not going to stand up and be counted. And so things things across the board are changing. Um, and I'm really excited about it's sort of, we're at the 1 year anniversary of an organization that I am a member of called Women in Nutraceuticals. So if nutraceuticals isn't a common word for you, it's really supplements, but it's a little bit beyond supplements. It's nutrition oriented ingredients in supplements, or these ingredients may go into beverages or food as well. The representation of women in, again, I said, in decision making positions, both on the science side in industry as well as the C suite in industry, is pretty similar to other industries. We're somewhere around 30%. Our goal in this organization is to, number one, support those women, support women who would like to progress in their careers, mentorship, webinars, education, all kinds of things like that, and increase visibility so that within the industry, and there's research that the organization has supported to show that industries that have more diversity across the board actually are more successful. And so speaking to ownership, leadership, to focus on diversity, and then also looking at the academic side and knowing that we need female scientists to push research on women and girls. We need female mentors for female science students, um, and support for both. And then, lastly, of course, calling for this clinical research for greater representation. And if anyone listening is interested, um, you can find Women in Nutraceuticals on the web and on LinkedIn, and there's a membership page, and it's easy to join and to begin to participate. I am on the science committee, and we are starting to do webinars. I think the first one is November 16th. So I don't know if this will be up before then, but you'll probably be able to find the recording and then follow on from there.
Nice. That's good to know. And I do want to say, just being a male, I also want people to keep in mind, like, also keep us in the conversation. Like, because at least someone like myself, I want to help however I can. I also want to know where we lack in certain things that maybe I just never think about because I'm just a guy or whatever. You know what I mean? So I want people to think about that too, even though I'm very much, again, speaking for myself, in support of these kinds of things, supporting females specifically. Keep us in the conversation,
Oh,
because we got to
yeah.
know these things.
Well, everyone wants an ally. And like I said, number of our colleagues are really making big headway in the clinical research studies. And again, while Women in Nutraceuticals is a female oriented organization, it is not uh, a female only organization. And we do have and want and hope to have many male colleagues as members, and then we are allies as well, right? I mean, so there's diversity and inclusion is very important across the board. And so looking to enhance representation for all those who are not represented.
Most definitely. And even thinking about more, something that you were saying that just again kind of made me think more, seeing more female participants in studies. Um, as we get more and more females studying exercise science and sports nutrition, dietetics and nutrition historically has been more female dominated. So I'm the rarity as being a
Right.
dietitian. Um, but And I think it's ridiculous that they refer to this because I don't like these like social norms, but they call it a pink collar profession.
Right.
But again, I think assigning colors is stupid. Like just a boy can like whatever color, a girl can like whatever color. But anyway, as we have more females in these fields of study, they'll be, in my opinion, more willing to be participants in research. I was a participant in a study. This was over a decade ago now, I want to say, with Dr. Doug Calvin when he was at a research facility not too far from where I live. And like I had to run in a hot room. I had to get dehydrated. They had to put a catheter in my arm, kind of thing. I got so dehydrated that the catheter wasn't working very well. They had to do straight needle sticks into my arm.
Oh
They
gosh.
couldn't get a good vein. It was terrible. But it's a part of being a participant in these
Right.
studies, and it's just kind of like I know what I signed up for. I also know the importance of this, and being a at that time maybe I was already an intern as a dietetic intern, but either way, it's kind of like whoa, it'll be cool to see what it's like to be a participant in a study. So I think that will more people in the field, more women in particular, will drive more female participants. You know.
Oh yeah, for sure. It really leaves a legacy, and it is something to step into the other side, because it is kind of a black box research studies to most people. And if you ever get a chance to participate, definitely you should.
Yeah, agreed. That's one of the tips that I give to dietitian students or just even RDs that maybe have never been a participant in a study. I like
Oh
to
yeah,
make them aware of that.
yeah, yeah.
So
Well, have we covered it all, Eric?
yeah, so there was something else I wanted to talk about, but I think I might talk about it on a different time, just to not let this drag on for a little bit longer. Who knows? Maybe this can be a fun episode for the next one. But I'll leave the people on a cliffhanger for that one.
I love doing that. Well, you enjoy that warm Florida sunshine,
Thank you.
and I will revel in the warm water falling from the skies here in Seattle.
Well, stay dry over there.
Thank you, Eric. It's been great. Again, if you all have enjoyed this podcast, please share it with your friends. And we hope to be on soon with a new topic and more interesting fun and laughs.
Awesome. Thank you, Sue. Thank you,
Take
guys.
care, Eric. Bye
You
bye.
too.